Greg, we're about to listen to another version of The Hitchhiker. Are you ready to travel across the United States?
Mary, there are humdrum ghost stories, and then there's The Hitchhiker. It's a fabulous spook fest. It's one of my all-time favorite horror genre radio plays. And once again, I'm ready to get quivers down my backbone, shakes in my knee bone. So let's get frightened, Mary.
Let's go.
The Columbia Network takes pleasure in bringing you Suspense. Suspense, Columbia's parade of outstanding thrillers, produced and directed by William Spear and scored by Bernard Herrmann. The notable melodramas from stage and screen, fiction and radio, presented each week to bring you to the edge of your chair, to keep you in suspense. I'm in an auto camp on Route 66, just west of Gallup, New Mexico. If I tell it, perhaps it'll help me. Keep me from going crazy. I gotta tell this quickly. I'm not crazy now. I feel perfectly well, except that I'm running a slight temperature. My name is Ronald Adams. I'm 36 years of age, unmarried, tall, dark, with a black mustache. I drive a 1940 Buick, license number 6Y175189. I was born in Brooklyn. All this I know. I know that I'm at this moment perfectly sane. That it's not me who's gone mad. It's something else. Something utterly beyond my control. I've got to speak quickly. At any minute, the link may break. This may be the last thing I ever tell on Earth. The last night I ever see the stars. 6 days ago, I left Brooklyn to drive to California.
Goodbye, son. Good luck to you, my boy.
Goodbye, Mother. Here, give me a kiss, and I'll go.
I'll come out with you to the car.
Oh, no, it's raining. Stay here at the door. Hey, what's this? Tears? I thought you'd promised me you wouldn't cry.
Oh, I know, dear. I'm sorry. But I do hate to see you go.
I'll be back. It'll only be on the coast 3 months.
Oh, it isn't that. It's just the trip. Ronald, I wish you weren't driving.
Oh, Mother, there you go again. People do it every day.
I know, but you'll be careful, won't you? Promise me you'll be extra careful. Don't fall asleep or drive fast or pick up any strangers on the road.
Oh, gosh. I think I was still 17 here, you told me.
Oh. And wire me as soon as you get to Hollywood. Won't you, son?
Of course I will. Don't you worry. There's nothing going to happen. It's just 8 days of perfectly simple driving on smooth, decent, civilized roads with a hot dog or a hamburger stand every 10 miles. I was in fine spirits. The drive ahead of me, even the loneliness, seemed like a lark. I reckoned without him. Crossing Brooklyn Bridge that morning in the rain, I saw a man leaning against the cables. He seemed to be waiting for a lift. There were spots of fresh rain on his shoulders. He was carrying a cheap overnight bag in one hand. He was thin, nondescript, with a cap pulled down over his eyes. I would have forgotten him completely, except that just an hour later, while crossing the Pulaski Skyway over the Jersey Flats, I saw him again. At least, he looked like the same person. He was standing now with one thumb pointing west. I couldn't figure out how he got there, but I thought probably one of those fast trucks had picked him up. beaten me to the Skyway and let him off. I didn't stop for him. Then late that night, I saw him again. It was on the new Pennsylvania Turnpike between Harrisburg and Pittsburgh. It's 265 miles long with a very high speed limit. I was just slowing down for one of the tunnels when I saw him, standing under an arc light by the side of the road. I'd seen quite distinctly the bag, the cap, even the spots of fresh rain spattered over his shoulders. He hallooed at me this time. Hello! Hello! I stepped on the gas like a shot. It's lonely country through the Alleghenies, and I had no intention of stopping. Besides, the coincidences, or whatever it was, gave me the willies. Stopped at the next gas station.
Yes, sir.
Fill her up.
Certainly, sir. Check your oil, sir?
No, thanks.
Nice night, isn't it?
Yes. It hasn't been raining here recently, has it?
Not a drop of rain all week.
Oh? Oh, I suppose that doesn't done your business any harm.
Oh, people drive through here all kinds of weather. Mostly business, you know. There aren't many pleasure cars out on the turnpike this season of the year.
I suppose not. What about hitchhikers?
Hitchhikers here?
What's the matter? Don't you ever see any?
Not much. If we did, it'd be a sight for sore eyes.
Why?
Oh, guy'd be a fool who started out to hitch rides on this road. Look at it.
Then you've never seen anybody?
No. Maybe they get the lift before the turnpike starts. I mean, you know, just before the toll house. But then it'd be a mighty long ride. Most cars wouldn't want to pick up a guy for that long a ride. And you know, this is pretty lonesome country here. Mountains and woods. You ain't seen anybody like that, have you?
No. Oh, no, not at all. I was just a technical question.
I see. Well, that'll be just $1.49 with the tax.
Thing gradually passed through my mind as sheer coincidence. I had a good night's sleep in Pittsburgh. I didn't think about the man all next day until just outside of Zanesville, Ohio, I saw him again. It was a bright, sunshiny afternoon. The peaceful Ohio fields, brown with the autumn stubble, lay dreaming in the golden light. I was driving slowly, drinking it in, when the road suddenly ended in a detour. In front of the barrier, he was standing. Now, let me explain about his appearance before I go on. I repeat, there was nothing sinister about him. He was as drab as a mud fence, nor was his attitude menacing. He merely stood there, waiting, almost drooping a little, the cheap overnight bag in his hand. He looked as though he'd been waiting there for hours. And he looked up. He hailed me. He started to walk forward.
Hello? Hello? Hello?
No, not just now. Sorry.
Going to California?
No, not today. The other way, going to New York. Sorry. After I got the car back on the road again, I felt like a fool. Yet the thought of picking him up, of having him sit beside me, was somehow unbearable. At the same time, I felt more than ever unspeakably alone. Hour after hour went by. Fields, the towns ticked off one by one. The light changed. I knew now that I was going to see him again. And though I dreaded the sight, I caught myself searching the side of the road, waiting for him to appear.
Yeah, what is it? What do you want?
sell sandwiches and pop here, don't you?
Yeah, we do in the daytime. But we're closed up now for the
I
night.
know, but I was wondering if you could possibly have a cup of coffee, black coffee. Just...
No, not this time of night, mister. My wife's the cook. She's in bed.
No, don't shut the door, please. Listen, just a minute ago... just a minute ago, there was a man standing here right beside the stand, a suspicious-looking man. I don't mean to disturb it. You see, I was driving along when I just happened to look, and there he was.
How's he doing?
Well, nothing.
You've been taking a nip. That's what you've been doing. Now, on your way before I call out sheriff Oates.
I got into the car again and drove on slowly. I was beginning to hate the car. If I could have found a place to stop, to rest a little. I was in the Ozark Mountains of Missouri now. A few resort places there were closed, only an occasional log cabin, seemingly deserted. That's all that broke the monotony of the wild, wooded landscape. I had seen him at that roadside stand. I knew I'd see him again. Maybe at the next turn of the road. I knew that when I saw him next, I would run him down. See him until late next afternoon. I stopped a car at a sleepy little junction just across the border into Oklahoma to let a train pass by. When he appeared across the tracks, leaning against a telephone pole. Perfectly airless, dry day. The red clay of Oklahoma was baking under the southwestern sun. Yet there were spots of fresh rain on his shoulders. I couldn't stand that. Without thinking, blindly, I started the car across the tracks. He didn't even look up at me. He was staring at the ground. I stepped on the gas hard, veering the wheel sharply toward him. I could hear the train in the distance now, but I didn't care then. Something went wrong with the car. The train was coming closer. I could hear its bell ringing and the cry of its whistle. Still, he stood there. And now I knew that he was beckoning me to my death. Well, I frustrated him that time. The starter worked at last. I managed to back up. When the train passed, he was gone. I was all alone in the hot, dry afternoon. After that, I knew I had to do something. I didn't know who this man was or what he wanted of me. I only knew that from now on, I mustn't let myself alone on the road for 1 minute. Hello there. Like a ride?
Well, what do you think? How far are you going?
Where do you want to go?
Amarillo, Texas.
I'll drive you there.
Gee. You mind if I take off my shoes? My dogs are killing me.
Go right ahead.
Oh, gee, what a break this is.
Hitchhike much?
Sure. Only it's tough sometimes in these great open spaces to get the break.
I should think it would be, though. I'll bet you get a good pickup in a fast car. If you did, you could get places faster than, say, another person in another car, couldn't you?
I don't get you.
Well, take me, for instance. Suppose I'm driving across the country, say, at a nice, steady clip, about 45 miles an hour. Couldn't a girl like you just standing beside the road waiting for Liz beat me to town, or any town, provided she got picked up every time in a car doing from 65 to 70 miles an hour?
I don't know. What difference does it make?
Oh, no difference. It's just a crazy idea I had sitting here in the car.
Imagine spending your time in a swell car thinking of things like that.
What would you do instead?
What would I do? If I was a good-looking fella like yourself, why, I just enjoy myself. every minute of the time. I'd sit back and relax. And if I saw a good-looking girl along the side of the road, hey, look out!
Did you see him?
See who?
A man standing beside the barbed wire fence.
I didn't see anybody. There wasn't nothing but a bunch of cows and a wire fence.
No?
What'd you think you was doing? Trying to run into the barbed
There's
wire
a man
fence?
there, I tell you. A thin gray man with an overnight bag in his hand. And I was trying to run him down.
Run him down? You mean kill him?
Say you didn't see him back there? You sure?
I didn't see a soul. As far as
Watch
that's concerned...
for him the next time and keep watching. Keep your eyes peeled on the road. He'll turn up again. Maybe any minute. There! Look there!
How does this door work? I'm getting out of
See
here.
him that time?
No, I didn't see him that time. And personally, mister, I don't expect never to see him. All I want to do is go on living. I don't see how I will very long, driving with you.
Oh, I'm sorry. I don't know what came over me, but please don't go.
So if you'll excuse me...
You can't go. Listen, how would you like to go to California? I'll drive you to California.
Seeing pink elephants all the way? No, thanks. Thanks just the same.
Listen, please, just 1 minute, please.
You know what I think you need, big boy? Not a girlfriend. Just a good dose of sweet.
Please.
There. I got it now.
No, you can't go. Please, come
Leave your
back.
hands off me. Do you hear? Leave your hands off.
She ran from me. As though I were a monster. A few minutes later, I saw a passing truck pick her up. I knew then that I was utterly alone. It was in the heart of the great Texas prairies. There wasn't a car on the road after the truck went by. I tried to figure out what to do, how to get hold of myself. If I could find a place to rest, or even if I could sleep right here in the car for a few hours along the side of the road. I was getting my winter overcoat out of the back seat to use as a blanket when I saw him coming toward me, emerging from the herd of moving steer.
Hello?
Maybe I should have spoken to him then. Fought it out then and there. For now, he began to be everywhere. Whenever I stopped, even for a moment, for gas, for oil, for a drink of pop, a cup of coffee, sandwich, he was there. I saw him standing outside the auto camp in Amarillo that night when I dared to slow down. I was sitting near the drinking fountain of a little camping spot just inside the border of New Mexico. He was waiting for me outside the Navajo reservation where I stopped to check my tires. I saw him in Albuquerque when I bought 20 gallons of gas. I was afraid to stop now. I began to drive faster and faster. I was in lunar landscape now. The great arid mesa country of New Mexico. I drove through it with the indifference of a fly crawling over the face of the moon. Now he didn't even wait for me to stop. Unless I drove at 85 miles an hour over those endless roads, he waited for me at every other mile. I'd see his figure, shadowless, flitting before me, still in its same attitude, over the cold, lifeless ground, flitting over dried-up rivers, over broken stones cast up by old glacial upheavals, flitting in that pure and cloudless air. I was beside myself when I finally reached Gallup, New Mexico this morning. There's an auto camp here. Cold, almost deserted this time of year. I went inside and asked if there was a telephone. I had the feeling that if only I could speak to someone familiar, someone I loved, I could pull myself together.
Your call, please.
Long distance.
Long distance, certainly. This is long distance.
I'd like to put in a call to my home in Brooklyn, New York. I'm Ronald Adams. The number is Beechwood 200828.
Certainly, I will try to get it for you. Albuquerque. New York for Gallup. New York. Gallup, New Mexico, calling Beechwood 20828.
I read somewhere that love could banish demons. It's the middle of the morning. I knew Mother'd be home. I pictured her tall and white-haired in her crisp house dress, going about her tasks. Be enough, I thought, just to hear the even calmness of her voice.
Will you please deposit $3.85 for the first 3 minutes? When you have deposited $1.50, will you wait until I have collected the money? All right, deposit another $1.50. Will you please deposit the remaining 85 cents? Ready with Brooklyn. Go ahead, please.
Hello?
Mrs. Adams' residence.
Hello, Mother?
This is Mrs. Adams' residence. Who is it you wish to speak to, please?
Who's this?
This is Mrs. Whinney.
Mrs. Whinney? I don't know any Mrs. Whinney. Is this Beechwood 200828?
Yes?
Where's my mother? Where's Mrs. Adams?
Mrs. Adams is not at home. She's still in the hospital.
The hospital?
Yes. Who is this calling, please? Is it a member of the family?
Well, what's she in the hospital for?
She's been prostrated for 5 days. Nervous breakdown. But who is this
Nervous
calling?
breakdown? Well, my mother never was nervous.
It's all taken place since the death of her oldest son, Ronald.
Death of her oldest son, Ronald? Hey, what's this? What number is this?
This is Beechwood 20828. It's all been very sudden. He was killed just 6 days ago in an automobile accident on the Brooklyn Bridge.
Your 3 minutes are up, sir. Your 3 minutes are up, sir. Your 3 minutes are up, sir.
And so I'm sitting here in this deserted auto camp in Gallup, New Mexico. I'm trying to think. Trying to get hold of myself. Otherwise, I'm going to go crazy. Outside, it's night. The vast, soulless night of New Mexico. 1 million stars are in the sky. Ahead of me stretch 1,000 miles of empty mesa. Mountains, prairies, desert. Somewhere among them, he's waiting for me. Somewhere I shall know who he is and who I am.
So ends The Hitchhiker, and to Orson Welles our considerable thanks for his playing of the title role. Suspense is produced and directed by William Spear. John Dietz was our guest director this evening. Tonight's radio drama was written by Lucille Fletcher. The original score was by Bernard Herrmann. This is the Columbia Broadcasting System.
All right, we've listened to The Hitchhiker. Greg, what did you think?
It's a unique twist on a ghost story. As I said at the top of the show there, quivers down your backbone or up your backbone, whichever way they go. I was shaking all over, let me tell you. And what I liked was Orson Welles, the narrator and the lead character, those opening remarks he made about, despite the fact there's no blood spilled, it's still blood curdling. And that's a very good point.
Yeah, absolutely. So for the listeners, we did the Hitchhiker back at the end of 2023. We did another version of it, but this is the original radio version, which was done on the, well, actually, it was done on the with the Mercury Theater first, and then done for the Suspense series in 1942. And stars are wonderful. One of our favorite voice actors, Orson Welles.
That's ridiculously talented man. And he was at the top of his game then. The previous year, his movie Citizen Kane had come out. And as we've heard previously on the Shiver Show, he narrated The War of the Worlds, which is in 1938, which was a fabulous hit radio play. Scared the living daylights out of countless listeners who thought it was real.
Yes, very cheeky. So this was written by Lucille Fletcher, and there's a whole backstory about Lucille and and how she came to be inspired to write this story. But maybe we can get to that in a moment. The other thing about this is Bernard Herrmann, who did the music for this production. So Lucille and Bernard were a married couple, and they were very much connected friends and colleagues of Orson Welles. So those three worked together in radio and film. But
Yes.
Orson Welles is so wonderful as Ronald Adams in this. He starts out as this, lovely young man, caring son, chuckling at his mother's concerns about driving across the United States all by himself. And then he just sort of descends into a murderous, unhinged person, right?
Yes, and unhinged. That's a great word for our Ronald. And one of the things that's interesting, and another twist, is that he's a corporeal ghost. He's got a body. He can do things such as drive a car, put money in a payphone, order coffee, fill up the car tank, and usually they're things that well, they're not quite as realistic as Ronald, and perhaps in some ways Ronald would rather that he wasn't in this situation.
Yes, yes. Well, this is a really interesting point to debate because I initially, thought that also, Greg, but then we got that wonderful letter from Hatted Sailor, one of our listeners, who said,
Yes.
he said, once Ronald dies on the Brooklyn Bridge, he is a ghost, and so is everyone else in his world. He's in sort of a purgatory, and therefore they're not corporeal so much as they're trapped in a dimension almost that it seems like they have a physical form, but it's only because their minds are trapped in their old body kind of concept, if you know what I mean. Is that making sense?
Oh my goodness me! First of all, I do remember that letter. Always happy to get a listener letter or email. It's a good point. I prefer to think that Ronald crossing the Brooklyn Bridge, comes to a sticky end, literally, and then his ghost carries on, but in in bodily form. In
Yeah.
fact, so much so that the girl hitchhiker that he picks up later on says, despite the fact he's been dead a few days, that he's a good-looking fellow.
Yeah, yeah. So how did Sailor, our listener, would say that she is a ghost, as is the guy at the gas station, and of course the hitchhiker himself. So it's just a
No,
perspective.
it's a perspective.
And listeners, if you want to weigh in on this debate, please do. We'd
Yeah.
love to hear from you.
Love to hear from you. Nevertheless, getting back to Ronald, Orson Welles has got that, as you've mentioned, the way he becomes unhinged. But Orson Welles got that powerful, driving narrative voice, and he's such a good actor that he starts off in that calm, way. Everything's just going to be tickety boo, and then the momentum picks up his voice picks up, the drama picks up, and
Yes.
you're swept along. As I think I said last time, I defy anyone to, hit the pause button and decide, no, I'll just wander off and get a cup of coffee and come back. No, you want to hear what's happening.
Absolutely. And this is I think Lucille Fletcher's beautiful writing. So she also wrote Sorry Wrong Number, which is another wonderful radio drama. But the prose is so beautiful, and it's quite spare, but it's also very poignant in parts. So he's unspeakably alone as he's driving across the United States. And when he finally decides he has to speak with his mother, he says, "Love could banish demons," because he's just so desperately alone. He feels that something very strange is happening to him, so he calls his mother. And there's and the detail of the rain speckled coat of the hitchhiker, just these wonderful little details that just really you are swept away by the story.
And I loved Sorry Wrong Number. That was another powerful radio play that we've featured on the Shiver Show. Now, in regards, we've mentioned her husband, Bernard Herrmann, and the fact that he did the Hitchcock music for Psycho and also for the Birds, so he knew how to set our nightmares to music. However, there are a number of things against him because one thing is that he cheated on poor Lucille with Lucille's cousin and
Yes.
then married the cousin. Ah,
Yeah.
what a naughty boy, naughty boy. How could he do it to such a gifted writer?
Yeah, well, these things happen.
Feel.
Yeah,
But
and she seems to have recovered from it because she went on to do some other wonderful writing. But the other thing about this production is the Foley. So the sound effects
oh
in this
yes,
are so great. Did you notice them, Greg?
I did. He said throwing away his handkerchief just in case so it was caught on camera. I certainly did.
Yeah.
I did. There was two parts that I liked, and I knew you were going to raise sound effects because you're our expert. But when the car got stalled on the railway track at the crossing,
Oh, yeah.
I mean, that was incredible. Given this is radio, it's an oral feast, AURAL feast, and also, although it went on for slightly too long, when they were putting the money into the payphone, clink,
Yes.
clink, clink, that was terrific. It was now it's been quite a few years, quite a few decades since I've ever used a payphone, but that sort of pumping the coins in,
Yes, yes. And it
very
used to be
realistic.
very suspenseful because occasionally you wouldn't have enough money and the operators were, they were harsh. So, it's actually quite amazing technology that a person in a switchboard, distant from this payphone can actually tell, that you've actually put enough money in. And so all of that technology is no longer around. And so people may not even understand what we're talking about. But,
Well,
the notion of a switchboard operator switching through the call, patching it through and sticking it into a radio cord board was also something most people wouldn't even imagine.
and what about the price that Ronald? I mean, holy heck,
That was
he's dead.
expensive.
He's dead, and he has to fork up $3.85 for 3 minutes. Now
Yeah, that was
this is
expensive.
roughly this is the early 1940s. That is damn expensive.
Yeah, yeah. The only Foley that I thought was a little off was he at one point stops next to a field and there's cattle
Oh yes.
roaming through. That was a bit bizarre, but that's my only, like a little red mark against that. But everything else was just fabulous in the Foley department.
Well, in the past on the Shiver Show, we've discussed sometimes those animal noises. You do get a feeling it could have been the sound effects guys doing a moo,
Ooh.
moo, moo.
Ooh. Yeah, we
Rrr.
we can be cattle, no problem.
Well, and oh, please. Now, in regards to the actual timing of it, it's interesting that the first one, as you mentioned right at the beginning, first went to air 1941 and actually went to air before Pearl Harbor. So this one happened. Sorry, went to air, roughly a year later, late 1942, and they're talking about the wartime. And they're talking about historic events. Harriman, sorry, the US representative, had been with Churchill and Stalin at a Moscow conference, and so that it was a totally different atmosphere for the listeners to hear this.
So let's talk a little bit about The Hitchhiker. So, what's your interpretation of who or what? The Hitchhiker was, Greg?
So glad you asked me, Mary. I do see him as the in Greek mythology, Charon, or as the Greeks would say, Haron, was the ferryman of the underworld, and he'd take the dead to the afterlife. Specifically, he'd take them to Hades, which I'll come back to in a moment. But he carried the souls of those who'd had funeral rites across the river Styx. He was the ferryman. He was poling away like that. Separate the river Styx, separate the worlds of the living and the dead. But of course, Mary, and this is the key point, in your case and my case, the Archangel Michael will be leading us to heaven. No hurry, by the way, Mike. You can leave it quite a few years, but Haron won't be waiting for us. It'll be an archangel for you and I, Mary.
Well, I hope you're right. I'm not going to weigh in on that because you could
Well,
be.
certainly not with your past.
Exactly. Exactly. But I loved how the hitchhiker becomes increasingly persistent as the drama unfolds to the point where,
Hello,
yes,
hello.
where he's calling to him, but also there, right at the end there, before he makes the phone call, he's appearing every other mile on the highway. And that is, like that's a pretty trippy idea. Driving along and
Well,
just
this is once again, it gets back to Lucille Fletcher's great writing. You can imagine it's almost as if the hitchhiker standing there tapping his watch. It's like, Ronald, whoa,
yeah,
look at the
Ronald,
time,
time to
look at the
go.
time, time to go.
Yeah.
I do believe that you've had some experience as a hitchhiker.
Oh, yes, absolutely. In my era, it was actually quite common. Don't, my mother and father obviously didn't approve of this, but I used to hitchhike to university every day because I didn't have a lot of money, so this was a way to get around. And when I was in high school, we lived quite a ways out of Vancouver, and the bus only came every hour. So I used to hitchhike into town even when I was a teenage girl. So it wasn't exactly the safest thing to do, but
No.
everybody did it. So how about you, Greg?
Yeah. Yes, when I was a teenager, during the school holidays, working on the wheat belts or the wheat belt area in Western Australia, where I grew up. And I used to hitchhike from the wheat belt areas back to Perth, where I lived. And it was a humbling experience. So there I'd be standing in the middle of nowhere, with the wheat waving,
Yeah.
not unlike Ronald there with his hitchhiker, the wheat waving like Kansas, with my right thumb out, and on the left hand I'd have my fingers crossed because let me.
Well, it's funny, Greg. I used to get picked up very easily.
Yes, well I have absolutely no comment on
It
that.
is it is not fair, but women do get picked up hitchhiking much easier than men, and
Oh
for good
no,
reason,
right? Yeah.
because we're more charming. Well, I would just like to change the subject back to our wonderful
Yeah.
writer, Lucille Fletcher, for a while and just
Oh
talk
yes.
about the inspiration for this story. So,
Yeah.
she's been interviewed about this, and she's actually explained that she married Bernard Herrmann in 1939. And Herrmann was to compose the music for Citizen Kane, a film that Orson Welles was making on the west
Mm.
coast in Hollywood, basically. So she was afraid of flying. So they used to drive from New York over to Los Angeles on a regular basis so that Bernard Herrmann could work on the film. And it was on one of those trips that Lucille Fletcher noticed this strange looking man on the side of the road while they were driving, to LA. And they saw him a number of times and they didn't pick him up. And he was this, he was a benign looking but strange. It spooked her a bit that he kept
Mm.
appearing ahead of them. And she just let that idea or that thought sort of percolate for a while, and a couple of years later wrote this radio play. So,
Right. That's fascinating, and I think with her writing there, and it's one of the magic things about radio plays is that now you know the US far better than I, but I still had the feeling, and because you've just got to imagine it, that she was in rainy New York, and then she sorry the character is moving across the states because they were it was evocative at each point, whether it happened to be, for example, wheat fields or wherever,
Yeah.
that you actually believed, yeah, yes, that's where he is.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. It had an authenticity, and you have no doubt that she stopped, at these little roadside cafes and petrol stations, and there were trailer parks and whatnot. So yeah, it's a beautiful piece of writing, and it was inspired by some real events. So,
Mm.
Greg, any final thoughts on The Hitchhiker?
Mary, tonight's show has taught us two things. That if you're thinking about picking up a hitchhiker, for example, in this case, somewhat slightly rain-flecked hitchhiker, don't, because if you let that hitchhiker on board, that's it. And the other point is, and I would recommend this to hitchhikers of male or female, is don't get into a stranger's car and the first thing you say to him is, "Why, you're a good-looking fellow," because it might send the wrong image.
Well, yes, hitchhiker's etiquette, I have to say. I wouldn't take my shoes off and say that my feet were sore either.
Oh
That's not
yes,
that's not
that's
likely to be very popular with
you.
hitchhikers.
You want your running shoes on.
Indeed. Well, food for thought, Greg. Good night.
Oh, good night, Mary.